Hi guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits, a Mid-Trap podcast. How you doing this week, Mike?
I'm good. Just a little busy. I got my concrete driveway ripped up today. I'm replacing that. And you know what it's like being in the middle of a home repair. It's like the ending will be nice, but getting through the slog in the middle is rough around the edges.
I know. I'm still like putting together my house. This is the third or fourth pod I've done in my bedroom. Yeah, we got our patio, so that was done yesterday. So have to have you over, cook some pizzas on the new uni. Still haven't busted it out of the box yet, but
pizza time.
Excited to have people over and have a housewarming thing. So
yeah, dude, you take your time to get settled. You've had a lot of changes the last few months, so settle in, take your time, and I'll be there with a 6-pack. When you're ready.
Sounds good.
Did I say a 6-pack? I meant a 30 rack.
Yeah, come on. Remember when we used to go to Rodman's and each of us buy a 6-pack? Those are the days. I actually went to Rodman's the other day. I was driving by and I was just like, well, let me go. Let me hop in.
Do you remember walking off campus to the liquor store, that Asian-owned liquor store up on Hawaii Ave? And then walking back with backpacks. And then the security would roll by and be like, I wonder why those freshmen are carrying like 4 duffel bags.
Yo, why does everyone have like a backpack and it's full to the brim? They're books, textbooks, I have all my textbooks in me at once.
They love studying. I take lots of notes in class.
Oh, those are the days.
Wait, the bookstore's that way.
Exactly.
The bookstore's on the other end of campus.
That's funny.
Oh man. Well, we've got something exciting planned for this episode. Really awesome interview we just wrapped up with 2 co-authors of the Tier 1 series. That was kind of unique.
Yes. Andrews and Wilson. I forgot to tell them. They mentioned, you're going to hear them mention that it almost like it's one author. They could just go by Andrew Wilson. Like
Andrew Wilson, they're done. Exactly.
Andrew Wilson. But yeah, no, they're 2 really nice guys. They were very kind to us. They sent us some merch. Go out there, support them, read their book, and yeah, we hope you enjoy this interview with them.
Welcome to our next Authors Series edition. We are really excited to welcome 2 guest authors on the show tonight. We have with us Brian Andrews and Jeffrey Wilson, the creators and genius behind the Tier 1 thriller series. Thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
Thanks for having us, man. Great to be here.
It's nice that you recognized us with the word genius because, now we'll come back for another show.
Right. I like to hear it up front too, because otherwise the whole show, we're trying to figure out how we work it in. So
we're off to a good start then.
Check the first box off. Yes. We're really excited to have you today. And I just want to say, I first came across you guys by Amazon. Actually, recommended your book to me. I guess Amazon knows my preferences so much. It was like, here, boom, you should read this. So Tier 1 was it. So, but before we get into your books, can you just tell us a little bit about, who is and what is Andrews and Wilson? Like, who are you guys?
Well, we both used to be taxi drivers, right, Jeff? And no, we're Navy veterans. First and foremost, we're Navy veterans. And we're friends. So we met at ITW Thriller Fest, which is just one of the greatest collection of thriller writers on earth. It really has become, sort of the go-to conference for anybody that wants to get into this business. And we met there. And, Jeff likes to tell this story that, I was this lonely submarine guy sitting at this table by himself. As we know, all submarine officers are like socially inept. And I think I was crying at the time. Is that right?
That's how I remember it. I mean, you say that's not it, but I know I can tell you this. He was by himself in a crowded room.
That's right. And I think I was just doing shots by myself, like stacking them up,
As thriller writers do.
Right. Just get the courage up to talk to anybody who'd listen. And that's when the stalking started. I mean, he saw me. And yeah.
I will tell you that, we joke a little bit about it. That's an exaggeration of how it happened. The psychopathy was probably more mine. I hate these social things and cocktail parties and stuff like that. It was, we were part of the same debut author class. So we were already both writing. We both had books out. And it was the year of our debut for both of us. And so I had to be there. And I remember sitting in the hotel room with Wendy, with my wife, and I'm looking through the program and I'm looking at all the writers and reading their bios, and I'm trying to find any other military guys so that I can have like 4 or 5 people that I can actually talk to and feel comfortable. And so it's really on me more than anybody. But Brian was one of the people in the bio that, I sort of memorized his picture, and he was sitting by himself. I'm sure he had just chased away a throng of fans, but I recognized, like, that's that Navy guy. And I went over and chatted with him, and sure enough, we hit it off, became fast friends, not just because of the Navy connection, although that's part of it, but we're both married. We're both very family oriented people. We had kids the same age. We were at that same stage in life. We both were debut authors. And so we became incredibly good friends. And that was kind of it. Like, there was no, lightning that struck and said we should be co-authors together. In fact, when Brian first floated it, probably at least a year later, we stayed in touch and we're good friends. Brian had the idea to do it because he was from the submarine community and I'd worked in the special warfare community. And he's like, we could do this brand of like subs and SEALs and it'd be so cool. And it sounded cool. I just couldn't imagine how you write, like how 2 people write together. It just didn't seem possible. So I'll be honest. I at first was the one that said, look, I'll help you with the book. It sounds like a great idea, but I said no. I was like, you're a good friend and I don't think you still will be if we try to do this. So initially I passed.
It is one of those things that, sounds a little crazy, because writing is you putting your prose on the page, and how do you make that work? We've talked to other co-author pairs. We've been on panels with them. And a lot of times what you see is, each person is writing sort of their own stuff and it kind of gets merged together. And what you end up with is 2 distinct voices.
Right.
And, that can be, if you're the reader and you like both of the author's voices, it's fine. But it is noticeable. And sometimes you'll see reviews on certain books that were co-authored and that can be brought up. And I think one of the things that we take great pride in is we hear a lot in our reviews that they think we're one person, or that, they can't tell who wrote what. And that's because our process from the very beginning, we were very intentional about saying, and I give Jeff all the credit in the world for this, is really his idea. We have to take the ego out of this process. It's just about the finished product. And, anything is open to redline, anything is open to change. And we really threw ourselves into that model. And at first it's a little weird because you're used to thinking that a sentence you wrote is perfect just because you wrote it. And of course, that's not true. Every sentence could get better or tighter or more interesting. But what it allowed us to do is to really have the freedom to say, okay, what's working, what's not working, and how do we get this great continuous voice all the way through. So if he's editing my work and I'm editing him all the way as we go, you end up with one voice, and it's not my voice, and it's not his voice, it's the Andrews and Wilson voice. So we've had some people comment on that, which is sort of interesting.
I guess just to follow up with that is, do you ever guys run into like loggerheads where like you completely disagree? Like, I wanted to say this, or I want the story to go this way. Like, how do you overcome those difficulties if they do arise?
You would think so. And it sounds like something that we say in interviews that has to be made up. But honestly, we really have never, certainly we've had differences of opinion because that's part of the creative process. I would say 50 or 60% of us creating a book is just us talking and brainstorming things out. And so we sort of work through a lot of that creative stuff up front. but there are certainly times when we'll get down to the wire and I've written something and he's like, I think it worked better this way or vice versa. So I'm not saying that we never have a difference of opinion, but I don't think we've ever argued. Brian mentioned putting ego aside, and in the military, there's it's bred into you, especially in the communities we come from, this idea of team before self, of mission before self. And I think it gets into your DNA and just becomes a part of how you do everything. And so I think that helps us, that military background. Right. It helps us look at something as a process, as a team. So that removes some of the ego and the conflict. But honestly, we have such trust in one another because we've been doing this for a while now, that if I get down and I'm like, I feel pretty strongly about this, but I can tell Brian really has a powerful opinion, I'll defer and I'll say, look, first of all, anything can be changed, right? So, okay, if you feel that strongly about it, let's do it that way and we'll see where it goes. We can always go back and change it. And Brian, correct me if I'm missing one, but I can't think of a time when we've done that where one of us has yielded that we then went back and changed it. So there's a lot of trust involved, but there has never been an argument that I can think of. We talk about it. In fact, a lot of times when there's, I don't know, I like this and I like this, what happens instead is it sort of merges into some third thing together as you brainstorm it out. So
is it like, are you guys writing the same chapter at the same time? Like, do you have just a Google Doc up, or how does what's the logistics behind this? I'm really intrigued by this. I recently read a novel that was co-authored, and the way they wrote it was the premise of the book was to write like letters to each other, so they didn't even know. They would like send each other letters, and then the story would evolve over time. So I'm just intrigued by this co-authoring and how the physics of it work, I guess.
What we do is sort of almost like that, but that's just phase one. So we do divide up the book into chapters by point of view. So we write third person multi-character point of view, which gives us great flexibility in this particular genre. It's great because we have the hero, we have the villain, and we have supporting cast. So you get sort of this nice 365 look at the plot and everybody's perspective as it's unfolding, and it also keeps it more interesting and fresh for each of us. So if you read Sons of Valor, okay, so it wasn't that I wrote only Chunk and he wrote only Kasim or Whitney or vice versa. We all spent time, or we both spent time in all the characters' heads, and that's really exciting as an author because you want to know these characters and stuff. And sometimes what we'll say to the other guy is, hey, you know what, as we're sort of mapping out the chapters, I'm kind of excited to write this chapter. Are you okay if I take this one? And I can't think of a single time when I said that where Jeff's like, no, I want to write that chapter, or vice versa. You can usually tell, I usually will know Jeff's probably going to want this chapter. He might be excited about it. I'll ask him. And that's sort of how we just divvy it up. And, it's that switching around of those chapters, I think, that makes the characters maybe a little bit more authentic. And this is kind of a weird way to get to the point I'm trying to make. But if you think about it, we all have sort of dialogue patterns that we fall into and ways of thinking that we fall into. And so if you read a book from an author, a lot of times, especially if you're in the 5th, 6th, 7th book of a novel, you'll say, well, that person seems a lot like this other character, right? This reminds me of so-and-so. But because there's the two of us inside each person's head, that personality really sort of gets mixed up. The dialogue isn't just the way I talk or Jeff talks. It really is a mixture. And it allows us to write, we think, characters that are very differentiated from each other.
Yeah, I will say, just to give you a little bit, drilling down on a little bit more of that detail, we don't write a chapter together. We divide the chapters up, and like Brian said, I don't do just one POV and him another. But let's say in the first act, first act of a 3-act structure, maybe I do most of Dempsey in Act 1. But every chapter that we write, every few chapters, we exchange them, and the other guy rewrites that chapter. So you're always still in the story and stuff like that. But then we're very intentional. Like Brian said, maybe he'll say, gosh, I want to write this one because I have some ideas on it. Or every now and then he'll say, hey, why don't you write that one? And it's because he knows that I need to get into that headspace because I wasn't, I was writing somebody else in the first third. Now I need to get sort of into that character's head. So there's a lot of trading back and forth. But we do write simultaneously. So I'm writing like chapter 1 and 2, and he's on 3 and 5, and I'm going to do 4, and we swap them back and forth. It sounds chaotic, but it actually is pretty efficient.
So what I heard from that is that to decide who gets the action scenes, you each pick a weapon, and then you fight to the death. That's what I heard?
Right.
That's what you heard.
Okay.
That's what we said.
All right, cage match, Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of cage matches.
Yeah, and a lot of actions in those books, so that's a lot of fighting.
Weapon of choice if you were going to fight over who gets to write the action scene?
If I was fighting Brian, I don't know, just the back of my hand.
I'd use a tomahawk.
Okay. Hey, well, since you brought it up, and really, really intriguing hearing the process of how this works, my mind's just going into Sons of Valor, and you guys kind of rebooted the Tier 1 series, if you will, and you created and was born Keith Chunk Redman. Would you say where he came from and who Chunk became is part of the outgrowth of this relationship, where you say it's not one perspective battling or trying to make space for another, but the two come together and make this omniscient third, if you will? Would you say Chunk kind of was born of that process? And how did you guys decide to move the series on to this next protagonist?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was born out of that process. But what's fun about Chunk and his whole team is they were born out of our process of collaboration for sure, but they were also evolved out of feedback we got from our readers. So the first time we introduced Chunk, which was in War Shadows, he had a very small role. He was only in a handful of chapters in that book, in the middle of the book. And we got as much mail on him as we do on some of our lead characters. Like they just, hey, I hope we get to, little stuff. We hope we see Chunk again. And we had decided early on that we were going to, in order to paint a picture that's a little bit more realistic than most thriller novels of how that universe actually works, we wanted to have layers of interactions with other agencies. And, the idea would be that they work with an agency and then you're going to maybe see those characters again, because that's how it works in the real world. You're just cross paths over and over again. So we always had sort of had that idea. And when we got so much positive feedback on Chunk, we put him in, as you know, a couple more books, including Red Spectre, where he had a very big role by then. We sort of had made the decision, but we grew his team a little bit and some of the characters on the team. From the very beginning, we knew that there would be potential to do something as a spinoff in the universe from Tier 1, because the premise of Tier 1 is that the entire Tier 1 SEAL team gets wiped out, right, because of leaked intelligence. And in the real world, they would fill that vacuum. They'd stand that team up again. So we always had sort of in the back of our mind that we would revisit that. We didn't know that it would be a spinoff series. But once Chunk started getting all of this positive feedback, it was very natural to just say, oh my gosh, like if they were going to stand it up and now Chunk's been involved with these guys, I bet they'd tap him. And so it sort of grew out of that collaboration, some reader feedback, and then just an excitement about bringing the Tier 1 team back.
That's pretty cool. And it makes me think a lot about We Are the Mitch Rapp podcast, about
Right.
Vince Flynn and the universe he created, because we hear from our listeners all the time. We ourselves bring up all the time how we thirst for some spin-offs and more adventure stories of a Scott Coleman, a young Irene Kennedy, or
Irene Kennedy, yeah,
Stan
an
Hurley.
origin story, right, for Irene. How cool would that be? Maybe an entire trilogy on that. That would be amazing.
And just how you guys took Chunk and wanted to expand upon that, and now have taken what looks like the initiative to start a series or reboot a series around him. I just wonder if that could be like the phase 2 of a rap series one day, and who that would be, because characters have to age as much as, Kyle and Vince tried to keep Rap around for as long as they could. And Kyle Mills has even said he's not aging Rap as fast as he should be in like the regular chronological order of things, so we can have him around. Inevitably, the day will come for what's next in the series. And I kind of like how you took Chunk and, put him on a pedestal for, I assume, your next few books. No, he's going to be around, right?
Well, this is truly a separate series. I mean, it's a shared world. There's going to be crossover between plot lines. There'll be for the savvy readers, there'll be references and there'll be character cameos that pop in and out. But we're going to continue tier one. The series is not done. It's just going to continue in parallel. And when we started tier one, even the tagline at the very, when you read the Amazon description page, the tagline says, this is the story of a man transitioning from a SEAL to a spy. And you guys, as Mitch Rapp experts and Mitch Rapp Uber fans, you can probably see like elements of John Dempsey, morphing towards Mitch. You see that happening to him, and that's very intentional. And, there's some readers at some point, around book 6 that start to think, gosh, am I even reading about a SEAL anymore? Is this guy a spy? And that's by design. And what's cool about Sons of Valor is with that, like you said, I like the word reboot. I like the way that you're thinking about coming back to the beginning, because Chunk hasn't changed. Chunk is a SEAL. Chunk is what Dempsey was 6 books ago. And so for a lot of our fans, even for ourselves, it is sort of fun to remind everybody, this is what tier 1 was like in the first third of book 1. This is what it felt like.
Bringing it back to the roots. Yeah.
I like what you're saying too about, not necessarily aging characters quickly, but at least evolving them and evolving additional characters. I think that, Clancy did that really well with Jack Ryan, didn't he? And now the franchise has done a good job of evolving other characters. And you've got Jack Ryan Jr. series now and a lot of neat things. And I think the Ludlum, the Bourne part of the Ludlum series, they've done the same thing. Josh Hood is writing the Treadstone series now. And at the same time that we've got these new Bourne books coming out, it would be super exciting to see that happen in the Mitch Rapp universe. You don't have to take him from, Marine all the way to the president like we did with Jack Ryan. We saw Clancy do. But some evolution of backstory characters even would be really fun and exciting, wouldn't it?
Right. Although the way we're comparing the two characters here, they're worlds apart in a lot of ways. Dempsey may be a little closer to Rapp, aging and becoming that spy, but Chunk, as I'm reading it, he's more like a Scott Coleman. He's that natural-born leader. It seems you guys, and maybe this comes from your personal history, but you guys chose teamwork and putting the team above the individual to be such a cornerstone of who he is as a SEAL, but also who he is as a human being, the way he treats the fellow teammates and their families. I love the scenes with the children and the kids and the barbecuing. That scene from Sons of Valor just sticks out. How did you make Chunk this well-rounded family man and team leader? Because Rapp, we don't get that. He likes the lone wolf. He doesn't trust anyone. He does not want a team around him. He begrudgingly has 3 people in the world he trusts. Scott, Irene. Well, I don't know if he trusted Hurley back in the day even, so I wouldn't say Hurley. But maybe Claudia now he trusts. So how did you choose to make Chunk this team leader, almost family man kind of persona? Because that's way different than what we get with our lone wolf Rapp.
Yeah, and different from Dempsey too, right? Yeah. Like as you pointed out, it's cool that you picked up on that because that certainly was by design, but it was also a little bit of a risk. Like Mitch Rapp, Jack Ryan Jr., Jason Bourne, Dempsey, they share some things in common while their arc is a little bit different. Their backstory, there's always that tragic backstory that was the motivating thing that leads them to go off sort of on their own. What we did with Dempsey was we did that evolution, but we slowed it to what we felt was a little bit more, rather than starting there and giving you flashbacks, we let you go on the ride of his evolution towards that, more lone wolf by the time he got to, Collateral for sure. But even by American Operator, he was sort of breaking the rules and going off on his own. And they were pissed at him all the time that he was not following the script. And so it was a bit of a risk. It was very intentional, but a bit of a risk that we talked about a lot about what to do with Chunk, because Chunk is, as you just pointed out, he's as far from Mitch Rapp or even who John Dempsey has become as you can get. because he doesn't have a tragic backstory. Can you build the hero's journey without that? Because what motivates Chunk? He gets up and he hops out of bed and he's like, I get to be a SEAL again today. He loves his job. He loves his teammates. There's no angst in Chunk. He just loves what he does. As you pointed out, he's a natural born leader. He's very charismatic, and his family is his team. He's a single guy. He doesn't have kids of his own, but he's the perfect uncle. He loves those kids of his teammates as if they were blood. And so we really did talk, didn't we, Brian, a lot about how is that going to work? He's a great character, but is he the leading character for something like this?
It was genius. And it worked. It landed.
Oh, well, thank you.
We're glad to hear that, because when he showed, like Jeff said, when he showed up in War Shadows, he was not comic relief, but he was close, to that. He was the bright light, the ray of hope compared to Dempsey's brooding, and cynicism. And so, like Jeff said, we spent a lot of time thinking, can this guy carry a series? Will fans really rally around him? And then also, again, back to this idea, we love how you notice the teamwork element, because that's real life. Real life, there is no one SEAL who goes out on a mission by himself. It takes 100 people to operate a nuclear submarine, fast attack nuclear submarine. It's not just one dude like up there on the con, like fire the torpedoes, all by himself. So, we wanted to capture the ethos of real life military service and what it's really like to be in these situations. And that doesn't necessarily fit the dramatic mold that people want. I mean, it's just natural. I'm a reader. I want to rally around a character. I want to be excited about person Bob or John or whoever, Jack Ryan. You want to rally around the one hero. It's human nature. So how do we do that? And like Jeff said, it took us a long time to dial it in for Chunk.
To give you more praise and pile it on, I think you did that in a really smart way with another character whose arc might even be more developed than Chunk's in this book, and that's Whitney, or Heels. And I don't want to say too much, but boy, does she play such a perfect role for establishing who Chunk is, the way he welcomes her, the way he, I guess, trains her in some ways, relies on her and trusts her by putting her in as I guess you would call it secondary character, even though to me she was a main character. She carried the story pretty well. You took a secondary character, almost made them rise to the level of your primary character because it highlighted the qualities of that primary character. How did you make her? And what you seem to write a female perspective and a female character really well. Was it your wives, kind of influencing that? Like, how'd you pull it off?
Well, for sure, it's being married, right, Brian?
Yeah, very true.
Well, we spent a lot of time talking about her because we had a very strong female protagonist, Elizabeth Grimes, in Tier 1. But Elizabeth's MO is, I want to be as tough as these guys. I want to hang with the guys. I want to kick down doors. I want to show them that I will not be intimidated. And we said, we don't want to just have a clone of Elizabeth. We want someone younger. She's a millennial. She thinks differently. And you remember, Jeff, that conversation we had where, like, what if she just doesn't even like to exercise?
Oh, the running scene. Yeah. Guys, if any of our listeners, if you did not read Sons of Valor, just wait for the running scene. You'll know what I'm talking about. It was brilliant.
And we won't spoil anything here, but I do remember that conversation, Brian. And I remember that the development of Whitney Watts was partly exactly what you said. She needed to be a foil to Chunk to really be able to see Chunk's multi-dimensional character. But the other thing we tried to do with Whitney, as well as some of the other characters on the team, is the whole premise of this book, in addition to, obviously sharing the universe with Tier 1 and standing up this new team, the real thematic element that we're trying to weave through the first book and through the entire series is this idea of a multi-generational war, right? And so, we talk about this a lot, the idea that, there are people out there now getting ready to deploy who weren't born when 9/11 happened, right?
Very true.
It's kind of mind blowing because it feels like yesterday.
It is mind blowing.
I have a son now who's going to turn 21. I also have a 5-year-old, but that's anyway. So we have this 21-year-old son. He could easily be deploying, right? If that was a decision he made, and he was born just in August of 2000. So he was 1. And so we really wanted to address that. And we wanted to address the idea of a new generation of warfighters on both sides, right? What's the new generation of warfighter look, the millennial, et cetera, within the SEAL teams and the intelligence community? And what does that look like on the bad guy side? So with that being sort of the foundation that we had set as a framework for where we wanted the series to go, Whitney Watts became the obvious, right? She's the obvious bringing in that thing. What is different about her type of service from your grandfather, right? Brian talks a lot about, the idea that service is defined by sacrifice. Well, here's a generation of people that don't think that way. Does that make their service less meaningful? Of course not. Whitney Watts isn't there whining and moaning about how hard it is. She's doing something that she loves. She's trying not to do the stuff she doesn't want to do. And she's an integral part of the team, a brilliant person whose presence needs to be there. And so that was very intentional and we put a lot of effort into Whitney Watts, a lot of effort. We sort of knew Chunk already, but we put a lot of work into her to bring those themes into the book.
That paid off as well. Loved her character.
Yeah, I think, you guys mentioned it earlier, but I think like the fact that, I think being co-authors really helps you, I don't know, give more life and personality to a multitude of characters that, a sole author, while if they're really good, they can do it multiple times. But like you said, you can see like the same sort of character popping up over and over again. But characters aren't like that in actual life.
Yeah, well, and we have someone I can call, right? Like, when I've written books by myself and you get stuck, and where do I go with this guy? I didn't have a Brian that I could just call and he could fix it for me. And having that, it's not just preventing writer's block, which we talk about all the time. Writer's block for us lasts as long as it takes to dial the number, and then we're off and running again. But it's more than that. It's not just I call Brian and I get an answer. I call Brian, he gives me an answer. That makes me think of something. And then we push each other up right. To where I don't even remember what the question I called him about is, but I know where I got something really special now. And that's really, really cool.
Having a Brian is like having a Chris.
Everyone should have a Brian.
Everyone should have a Brian. There's the title of our interview.
Dude, that's the next shirt for the merch.
So I have to commend, we're giving you guys a lot of praise, but one more piece of praise, your covers. So on our podcast, every time we do a Mitrab book or Vince Flynn book or Kyle book, we talk about the covers, and we love a good cover. And you guys have really good covers. I wanted to know, do you think about these, or are you involved in them in any way? They seem to be, I don't know. I really enjoy your guys' covers. I wonder if you could touch on that in any way.
So first of all, thank you for noticing. The Tier 1 cover, we had a lot of input, and what's cool about it, a lot of people don't know, and we could even pull up some stuff, just this first one just sort of has some of the ethos right in there. So, you can see that the world is tilted. We call that the Tier 1 tilt. Every cover had a tilt because it was this idea that, Dempsey's world was just knocked off balance from the very beginning of the book. And there's always a hidden bone frog. It's the most visible on the first cover, but that bone frog, as you know, it's also on the spine typically of all the books. That bone frog represents the frogmen is a name for the seals or frogmen, and the bones of the frogmen represents the honoring the fallen. So those two elements were on all the Tier 1 books, along with an explosion was always somewhere in there, and the operator moving. And one of the things that we loved about Blackstone Publishing is we think they have the best covers in industry. So we put together, a nice mood board with all the Tier 1 covers and other elements we liked, and sent that to the artist, and they came up with this, which also has a slight Tier 1 tilt, paying homage to the Tier 1 series. But you'll notice the 6 stars. Some folks might not notice that, or piece that together. But that's an oblique reference, right, Jeff, to the unit.
Okay.
You got this badge title, which is something that they put together that we've never seen before. It looks like a block of aluminum just sort of stamped onto the cover.
It's really cool.
I will say we've always been very involved in our covers, and we've been very blessed to work with publishers and cover artists who are willing to engage with us and, go back and forth and make tweaks. And they've always been very gracious about that. But I will tell you the one thing that stands out about the Sons of Valor cover, other than how amazing it is that cover came to us and we were like, done.
Yeah.
Like there was like a couple tiny little, there's always a little something, but like the tier one, every other cover we've ever done. Actually, we have a series coming out in September that we should say, we're going to talk about covers. We have this amazing cover for Dark Intercept, the first book in the Shepherd series. And I will say that was another example where the cover came and we were like, we feel like we should say something so we look like we care, but Blackstone did such an incredible job with this cover that it came, and there were a couple minor little things that we tweaked, but we made no structural change to that cover. That's an amazing cover artist team right there that used our input and mood boards and looked at the old covers, and that's what they came up with. It's incredible, isn't it? I love the cover.
What drives me nuts is with some of these, and I know it's not the author's fault. Normally it's like the third publishing of the paperback, but you get like some cover artist in there who puts a random scene that has nothing to do with the book. It's just
not
generic.
even in the
It could
book.
be on any thriller, any thriller thing. And I don't know. It's really, it warmed my heart to see your guys' covers. They're very
That
good.
group must have some liaisons or somebody in the military community, because those tech specs and the badassery, like these super high tech commandos with the night vision goggles and everything, that's intense. Like I was intimidated by your covers at first, and it was crazy with Sons of Valor because you flip those goggles up and then it's Chunk, and, just this kind of deep emotional guy and just superhuman on a personal level, like that. Wearing all that crazy super commando shit, like in all that gear, man, those covers are just badass. They're just badass.
And the representation of the character Chunk was so perfect and so iconic. I mean, I know you've got it there, and I've got it. It reproduces in so many different ways. It's we've partnered with Bone Frog Coffee, as I'm sure you're aware, to have a Sons of Valor blend, which we use to raise awareness for Seal Legacy Foundation, as well as the several other charities. But it was this perfect cover to reproduce on coffee, on shirts, that character is just perfect. It's right on. It's exactly correct.
Absolutely. And just because we'll be running the audio, you showed a mug there. I'm wearing my t-shirt.
Yes. Go buy some merch, buy some coffee.
Where can the people find your merch or get links to the Bone Frog Coffee?
It's all on our website. So if you go to our author website, andrews-wilson.com, there's links to all of our books, and we have a dedicated fans page. So we love when people send in pictures of us or not of us, but of themselves with the book or in the merch. We'll post that to our wall. And there's also a link, if you go to the top, it just says gear, and that goes to our merch site. And that's andrews-wilson-gear.com if you want to just type it in.
And in addition to going there to check out your gear, folks can order Sons of Valor and all your other books. And there's another book in the series. You mentioned Dark Intercept. Can you give us a hint at what's going on with this new? Is this a standalone novel? Is this a new series? Where'd that idea come from?
Yeah, so this is a new series that we're really excited about. It's something a little different for the Andrews and Wilson brand. It brings that same door-kicking Navy SEAL kind of character to the page in a very different way that also pulls through it some faith elements and some supernatural spiritual warfare elements. It's published by Tyndale House, which is one of the largest, probably the largest Christian fiction publishing houses in the world. But this is a new type of thing for us. It is the first book in a series. It'll be at least 3 books. We hope it'll be more. But the premise here is that Navy SEAL Jedediah Johnson who is at the end of his career. He's medically retiring after an injury, and gets a phone call from someone from his past who shared a experience that we won't get into and spoil anything, but these two young men in high school shared an experience where they confronted true evil, and it sent their lives on different trajectories. Jedediah was originally going to become a youth pastor, and he became a Navy SEAL instead. And his buddy, who was a troublemaker, wound up becoming a pastor. And now his daughter has been kidnapped, and he asks Jed to help track her down. So it's a very different story for us. But I think fans of Andrews and Wilson will see things that they are very familiar in Jedediah, in some of the SEAL action that we have. And then there's this whole elite team that we don't want to say too much about that evolves from this story and carries on the series from there. So it's the same kind of stuff we do, but with another faith element to it that addresses issues of crisis and faith and spiritual warfare that a lot of people that have spent time in combat theaters of operation have struggled with. So it was an opportunity to sort of share some of those experiences with folks.
Was that something that you guys had wanted to do, or did they reach out to you, or or how did that come about?
Sort of both, right, Brian?
Yeah, we had kicked around. We had a discussion about evil, true evil in combat, or have you ever faced true evil? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is it real, or is it in your head, in your mind? How does that fit in with God and faith? And so we sort of started playing around with it. We started writing it, and we'd written maybe 100 pages, and we were really excited about it. And it was about the same time we were working on Tier 1, and Tier 1 took off, and we kind of put it on the back burner, but the story never left us. And that's one of the things that I think, I don't know how it is for other authors, but Jeff and I are both the same on this point, which is, maybe it's our psychoses, I don't know, but like the characters start to feel like real people to us. They really don't feel like characters. Sure. They feel like people that we know, and we kind of, and we kind of want to tell their story. We wanted to tell Jed's story. We wanted to know what happened to him. And like Jeff said, it's a little bit of a risk because there are some supernatural elements in the story. So sort of think Stranger Things meets Taken with a little dash of Tier 1 like thrown in for good measure.
That's okay. I hadn't thought about it that way, Brian. That's perfect.
That sounds very, very intriguing. So you got my pre-order.
I was just thinking, this sounds like The Shack meets Jack Carr meets Doctor
There you
Strange.
Go. Yeah. Wait, Mike, I'm writing that down. What was really cool was, there's a lot of writers, including ourselves, who at times have these stories that you're dying to tell, and you're busy, and you just feel like it's never going to happen because you've got other projects and life and that kind of thing. And this one, just apparently the universe needed this story told, because we hadn't even thought about it in, I don't know, a year or more than that probably. And a good friend of ours, Josh Hood, who writes the Treadstone series for Putnam, he was on an airplane with someone from Tyndale, and they were talking. He was coming back from a writer's conference. And she was asking him about his writing, and he's got a very strong faith. They were talking about their faith. And she goes, wow, we're really looking to grow our male readership, and, we want to start branching out into more action and adventure. Do you have anything like that? And Josh, being Josh, said, oh, no, I don't have. I just kill terrorists and kick in doors. But I have some friends that, because we had talked to him about this story like 2 years earlier. And so he calls us up and he goes, would you mind if I shared contact information? I was like, oh, no, that's okay. You can do that. And he goes, oh, good, because I did. And, and honestly, we thought, some lady on a plane like that was going to be the end of it. But literally 48 hours later, Gina calls us, our agent, amazing agent, Gina Panettiere at Talcott Notch, calls us, and she says, I got a call from Tyndale House, and our editor there now, Karen Watson, who's the publisher for fiction for Tyndale, asked to talk to us, and we had a nice conversation about the direction of action fiction and how it overlaps with faith fiction, and there you go. And it just sort of cool. Fell out of the sky, and here it is. Comes out September 7th. So I guess go Josh Hood, I guess.
Again, folks can order that on your website. It's andrews-wilson.com. Is that right?
Yep.
That's it.
Great.
Yep. There's links to buy all of our books on the site. You can't buy them through the site, but there's links to whoever your favorite bookseller is. As you know, we all strongly encourage people to support their independent booksellers in their communities if they can. Our books are there too, but there's links throughout the site.
All right. Well, before we let you go, we have to ask a question we like to ask all of our guests. Do you have a favorite Mitch Rapp, either character or book or memory or interaction, anything about Vince Flynn that stands out to you?
Well, I'll go first. I just my favorite interaction is just how I feel like Vince. If you read you read some of his early articles, or interviews when he's talking about how he didn't think of himself as a storyteller. He didn't think of himself as a big deal. He's very humble. And, here's a guy who really jumped into a very guarded industry and blazed a path with a character that's every bit as iconic, if not more iconic than any other thriller hero in history. And I just loved his optimism and enthusiasm about and humble and humility, I guess. It's interesting that those things all went hand in hand as him as an author, as a person.
Which is why it's so cool that Kyle is writing it now, right? Because there's another gentleman author. What a great guy,
yeah.
Kyle Mills. You know that Mitch Rapp is in good hands with Kyle Mills. I think for me, first of all, I agree with everything you say. Everyone in the writing community is as big a fan of Vince Flynn as they are of the Mitch Rapp character in the stories, because he's just this amazing human being. God rest his soul. So tragic to lose him. For me, the stories, I do remember when I can't remember which one, because now I've read so many of them. I don't remember which of my first one was, but it wasn't the first one. It was like in the middle, and my dad had given it to me, and I read it, and I was like, whoa. And then you look, and there's like 3 others already, and I was like, wait a minute, where did this come from? And I think what struck me when I first was introduced to Mitch Rapp was the way that Flynn, others have done this, but not like Vince Flynn and now Kyle do with Mitch Rapp. The way they built a universe around a character that was multidimensional. Usually when you have a character that drives an entire series, as we talked earlier about the solo, guy versus a team, it's very difficult for you to develop a multi-dimensional universe around one dude, right? You can do it in a book, maybe 2, but to do it over and over and over again and have the backstory grow and have the secondary characters grow despite their lack of being in the floodlights.
Yep.
That's an amazing gift. And I was struck by that in the very first book, how even characters that only had a couple of pages in the whole book, they were still real people. They weren't just like a placeholder to convey information to the reader and move on.
So true.
And I think that's probably what I will always remember about Vince Flynn, and what I think Kyle does very, very well as well. Agreed.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we want to, don't want to take up too much of your time. But we thank you for coming on the pod, and really encourage our listeners to go out there, buy all your books, pre-order your new book. Yeah. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having us, guys. We'll come anytime. Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. And hey, if you're audiobook listeners, Sons of Valor and Tier 1 are both narrated by the incomparable Ray Porter. So,
what was that like hearing that
good.
He was going to do your books? Because he nailed it, as always.
Yeah, I did my first standing backflip, first and only.
And his last.
Yeah, that was awesome.
You can say that Dark Side from the movies read your books. That's pretty cool.
He is an incredible talent.
Yep. And George Goodell doing the Vince Flynn books, Ray Porter doing everything else, Jack Carr, you guys, that is just awesome. We've got some great narrators in the genre.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us on. This was great.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that one. Our author series. Hope to keep bringing those to you. We keep finding authors that want to talk to us. Don't know why. They would want to talk to two bad golfers. But we're happy to talk to them. So we're gonna keep bringing them to you.
Come on, bad golfers, good podcasters.
Good podcasters. And we gotta get into that. Maybe looking into the Thriller Fest. That'd be a cool thing to go to.
Yeah, that was kind of awesome that they were telling us about meeting at Thriller Fest, all these people they see, and just being awesome guys, just good souls. They invited us and said, hey, if you're ever there at Thriller Fest, give us a buzz. We want to take you around, introduce you to people, and really lean on us. So that was just really cool that they were so open and welcoming. We'll have to consider that. I never thought about you and I going to a book festival and kind of promoting the wares.
I wonder if they have a day pass where we could just go for a day, talk to a bunch of authors, pick their brains. Not that I don't want to become an author, but it'd just be cool to talk to people. So
I wonder if other conferences I've been to, there are booths. You can get a booth or a table. That'd be kind of cool just to promote the podcast. People come by, talk to us, ask us questions, maybe do a live show or something. That would be really cool. We'll have to see what 2022 beholds.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, next week we'll be bringing to you our Last Man Part 1 pod. So really looking forward to bringing you that. Mike, you've finished half of it, right? I'm 10 chapters in. It's so good. It's so good.
This book is a masterpiece.
I forgot how good this book is.
I read it I think last year. I read it during the pandemic, actually.
Yeah, we were supposed to go on with
Ryan.
Ryan, but then they never actually did that pod. So
yeah, his group was going to do a book club discussion of it, but yeah, I don't know what happened there. But I read it for that, and I was like, man, this book is so good. And then I kind of forgot about it. I picked it up, and in chapter 1, on this reread, which is probably my 5th or 6th read, I was like, man, this book is so good. I'm thinking top 5. I'm not going to put it. I'm not going to give away.
Wow.
I'm not going to spill the beans yet. But dude, this book is so good.
It's very good. I like the murder mystery vibe it has to it, or it's more of I don't know. We're spoiling next week's content, so
right.
Look for that.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, we always have to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. Find us at midtrappod.com or using our Twitter or Instagram handle at midtrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.